Hello and welcome to another video. This one is going to cover the effects which can be set up for the Warlock Archetypes found in Xanathar's Guide to Everything for Fantasy Grounds. So we've gone ahead and created a level 20 Warlock. We've got no abilities or anything like that particular except for the charisma, but they're not particularly important here. And if we go into the Actions tab, we see we've already added in all the effects that we can for the Celestial. You'll notice that not all of the ones on the list are here. This is because the first couple, we can't set up any effects for those, and there's no timers or anything, so we don't need these on the Actions tab. So let's have a look at the first one here, Healing Light. We get an ability which creates a dice pool of d6s equal to your level +1, and you can use these dice to heal. So we've just simply set up a simple heal of 1d6, and we've also gone into the preparation mode and set up the number of dice in the pool. So that means that we've got our tick boxes, so we can tick these off as we use them. Now the amount of dice that you can use is variable up to your charisma modifier, so there isn't really a way that we can limit the healing to that kind of thing. So the player will just have to be careful as to how many of these they can tick off in any one heal. So that's the Healing Light. The next one is Radiant Soul. So we have resistance to radiant damage, and when you cast a spell with radiant or fire damage, you can add your charisma modifier to one target. So the way we've done this one is obviously the first effect is just resist radiant. We've set this up with a name so that we know why this effect is sitting on the Warlock. Set it to self and no duration or expend. And for the second part, we've set up two damaging effects. Now we could have used the damage modifier, but because this one is only against one target, if we had multiple targets, then that would give the damage to all of the targets, because you just roll one set of dice and apply the damage to all the targets. But this is more restrictive. You can only have this extra damage against one target. So we've set it up this way so that it can just be dragged and dropped onto the target. And it's just simply, we've used the charisma statistic so that Fantasy Grounds works all for us, and we've given it, in this case, the fire damage type, and we've created another one with the radiant damage type to cover that situation as well. So that's essentially that one. And Celestial Resilience. This one allows you to give yourself some temporary hit points equal to your Warlock level plus your charisma modifier, and then you can also do half your level plus your charisma modifier to allies. So if we have a look at the effects for this one, there are two, and it's simply set up as a temporary heal, and we've set the target here, or the statistic here, to Warlock level and to charisma, and Fantasy Grounds has correctly calculated that as 22. For the allies, we've included exactly the same effect, but because it's only half level, and because we can't actually put a half level statistic in here, we've had to finesse this by reducing the level 20, or the 20 points that you would get for a level 20 Warlock, by a -10. So this would have to be manually recalculated, redone whenever the Warlock levels up, and you can see that this is giving us 12 temporary hit points, which is the correct arithmetic. So Celestial Radiance, Searing Vengeance. This one allows you to sort of jump up instead of dying. You regain half your hit points, and then you can do some radiant damage to targets around you, and they're blinded until the end of the current turn. So there isn't an effect that we can set up to automatically calculate how many hit points you should heal. So in this case we have just added in the bonus, so that'll have to be done, or added in half the hit points. That'll have to be done manually. Our Warlock here is 103 hit points, so half of that rounded down would be 51. So we just have to calculate that, and every time the Warlock levels up you'd have to recalculate that bonus. The 2d8 plus 2 radiant damage is easy enough. That's simply dragging in the 2d8 plus the charisma bonus and typing in radiant, and that just gets dragged onto the targets. Now this last bit, the targets are blinded until the end of the current turn. So the current turn will almost certainly be the Warlock's turn, because this can only kick off at the start of the turn when you have to make a saving throw. So Fantasy Grounds won't remove it. If the blinded effect is placed onto any targets, Fantasy Grounds won't remove that. If we set this round to 1, that'll come off at the beginning of the Warlock's next turn, which is not what we need. We can sort of finesse this if it's worthwhile. If the Warlock were to put the blinded condition onto Orc 1 here, for example, if we open up this dialogue here, we see that the initiative to adjust on is 10, which is of course the initiative of the Warlock. If we want this effect to be removed from this Orc as soon as the Warlock's turn ends, then we can change this 10 to let's say 9.9. And as soon as the Warlock finishes their turn, then this effect will come off. Now whether or not it's worth going to all this trouble or not, because this could affect several targets, it's probably up to you and to the situation. But the Warlock may not have any actions left, for example, after he's done all this, so it may be that that's it, he's got nothing else left to do. But if he does have actions and he takes those actions against Orc 1, then it could be important that the Orc is blinded for the purposes of advantage and disadvantage, etc. So you may want to put it on, and you may want to do that. Or you may just want to manually put it on, or manually do the disadvantage or advantage to attack rolls that the blinded condition gives. So the effect is there, it's up to you how you want to use it. Right, that's the Celestial. I'll pause the video now and I'll add in all the effects for the Hexblade, and we'll come back and discuss them when I have done so. Okay, we have added in the Hexblade's effects, and you can see we've only got a couple, and again this is because quite a few of these are Theatre of the Mind, or they don't have any effects or any kind of expiry, so there's no need for them specifically to be on the Actions tab. So let's have a look at the first one, Hexblader's Curse. So at first level we curse a creature for a minute, and whilst that creature is cursed we get various bonuses. And it finishes on a short or long rest, or it can't be used again till a short or long rest. So the first thing we've done is go into preparation mode and change the timing to 1 per rest, which gives us our little checkbox which can be used to indicate that we've used the curse. So in order to make this one work, we have created 2 effects. The first effect is simply called Curse. Now you could call this anything you like. Cursed might not be the best word, maybe hexed, anything you like really, but it can be any kind of word that you want to use. Lasts for a minute and it's set to targets. Now this effect is going to sit on the target, so if the Warlock here targets Orc 1, then they're going to place this effect onto Orc 1, and Orc 1 now has this effect on it. And then the second effect comes into play here. This uses the if target function with the custom function to test to see if the target, in this case, has the curse tag on it. And if it does, then we're going to get some additional damage equal to our proficiency modifier. this also lasts for a minute, and the targeting here is self. So this effect goes on to our Warlock. So when the Warlock makes a damage roll, this effect is going to get tested out. This test here is going to be looked at by Fantasy Grounds, and if it's positive, in other words, if the target that's taking the damage has got the curse tag on it, then an additional d6 of damage will be added in. So we can see this in operation if our Warlock has already hit Orc 1 and does some damage to Orc 1. Then you can see that an additional 6 points of damage has been done to this Orc. If we were to attack another one, say Orc 2, then that one, you don't get the extra damage for that one because it doesn't have the curse tag on it. Now, the next bit, we just can't do an effect for this. You get a critical on a roller of a 19 or a 20. So this would have to be done manually. I mean, you could go into the weapon metadata here, and you could change the critical on to 19 for the melee or ranged. And then take it back off again after the minute is off. But you've got all sorts of problems there if you do that, because if the Warlock doesn't attack the cursed character or whatever. So it's up to you how you do it, but the best way to do it is just manually. And if you watch the dice and you actually do critical, or you actually score a 19, then instead of just rolling damage as normal, you would hold down shift and drag the damage, and this will automatically make the damage critical. If we can see here, by holding down shift and dragging the damage, we did get a critical hit, or we did critical damage even though it wasn't a critical hit. So I think that's probably the only way that you can realistically do that. And in the second or the third part of this is that if the cursed target dies, you regain hit points equal to your level plus charisma. So we've just set up a straightforward heal. We should have targets to self, and we've got the two lines here, one giving the Warlock statistic and one giving the charisma statistic. So that all adds up in this case to 22 because we've given our Warlock a 14 charisma. So that's how the Hexblader's curse would work. Now the next one, the Hex Warrior. This allows you to basically use your charisma modifier instead of strength or dex to your attack and damage rolls with a particular weapon. Now it is possible to set up an effect to cover this. You could have an attack of minus strength plus charisma, and a similar one for damage. But that would apply to any weapon and any attack that was used, so that's not really too clever. So the best way to deal with this is to go into the weapon data itself, and we could, for example, let's say that this is our Hexblade. So we can just change the name of this weapon to indicate that, and then go into the weapon properties. You'll see here that the stat for the attack and damage is set to base, which means that it's set to the base value that Fantasy Grounds knows for this particular weapon. So since this is a club, we know that it's a melee weapon, so therefore the base attack and damage bonus is set to strength. If this were a ranged weapon, it would be set to dexterity. So Fantasy Grounds uses this figure, and it can be changed. So if we go into the stat here and just cycle through until we find charisma, and do the same for the damage, cycle through until we find charisma, and you'll see now that the weapon's bonus to attack and damage has changed to include the Warlock's charisma rather than his strength. So that, I think, is the easiest way to deal with the Hex Warrior thing, and you can do this just for this hexed weapon, or the weapon that they have used, so that any other weapons that they use will just use the normal base bonuses rather than the charisma. The next one is a cursed Spectre, and so the Warlock, if the Warlock slays somebody, then they can raise their corpse as a Spectre, and they can have that Spectre under their control until they finish a long rest. So we've got the NPC Spectre here. So I'll show you how the Dungeon Master would give the player the use of the Spectre. So the first thing that the DM would do would be to drag this NPC and put it onto the combat tracker. We can make the NPC visible, and then we're going to click on the red hostile icon until it turns green to make it friendly. We then want to get our map and put the Spectre, and in this case all the friendly creatures as well, on the map. We can just sort these to be a bit more central. And once we've done that, then the Dungeon Master would drag the icon here and drop it onto the player who is going to be controlling the Spectre, just like that. Now if we have a look now at the player's view, we can see that the player has got the Spectre up here, and the Warlock and the Spectre and all the other players are on the map, and the player now has full control of the Spectre in terms of its movement. So if the player wanted to move the Spectre, for example, then it can do. The DM would have to approve that move. And the Spectre, the player can also make or use the NPC sheet to make attacks and damage rolls. So if the Spectre here was one to attack Orc 1, if you mouse over these, anything that highlights is an attack or a damage or a saving throw or whatever. So the player can simply drag the attacks and do the damage, and they can do saving throws or whatever. So all of that can be player controlled. If the player should close this, they can get it back by double clicking on the Spectre and or the token for the Spectre, and it'll come back up. So that's how the DM would give control of the NPC sheet in this case. Now, in addition to the ability to bring up the Spectre, the Spectre starts off with some temporary hit points, which are equal to half the Warlock level. So we've set up an effect for that, a heal effect, set it to targets and temp. We can't actually set the half level in the stat, so I think we've seen this earlier. We would set this statistic here to the Warlock level, which in this case would be 20, and then we've got to finesse that by putting in a negative bonus to get it back down to half, and so we get 10 in this case. And in addition, the Spectre has got a special attack bonus equal to the Warlock's charisma modifier. So we have set up an attack K and set it to targets, and if we drag this onto the Spectre now, we can see that the attack bonus that the Spectre gets is the Warlock's charisma bonus. The Spectre itself has got a charisma of 0, or the bonus is 0, and so clearly, since that's saying attack 2, it's feeding off of the Warlock's bonus. So it's important that you do it that way, otherwise this won't make sense if you do it any other way. So that's how we would use the Accursed Spectre. We've also actually we should have gone in and set this to one use per daily, since we need to finish a long rest. So that would allow us to tick that off once we had used it. So that's a cursed Spectre. The Arbor of Hexes is just a theatre of the mind thing. We can roll a die 6 and on a 4 or higher and attack misses, even if it hit. And that leaves us with Master of Hexes. This essentially allows you to move your Hexblader's Curse from the original target to another if the original target dies. All we would need to do here would be to go back into Hexblader's Curse and put the cursed effect onto a new target. Now, it isn't clear to me from reading this whether or not the original minute expires and you get another minute, or whether or not you just get what's left of the minute. So that isn't really very clear from that, but that's how you would do it anyway. So that's the Hexblade, and that is the Warlock Archetypes for Xanathar. So that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.